You talked about the drawings that you would do on the blackboard in the back, and in particular the ones that popped Andre the Giant. And I wondered if you wouldn't mind telling London what kind of things you would draw on that blackboard.
Wow. I would draw everything that didn't really happen. You know, if somebody, somebody was with an ugly girl in the bar, talking to her or anything, it was like the next day it would be like a full-blown orgy on the blackboard and stuff like that. Anything that, to be honest, it was to make everyone laugh. And I think one of my favorite cartoons was, I'll try to describe the orgy itself. I would always draw this big tree, like a big giant tree, and all the wrestlers would be trying to climb up the tree. And while they were climbing up the tree, there'd be this orgy happening. And none of it was based on anything real at all. I mean, in fact, I used my centerpiece of my cartoons was always Chief Jay Strongbow. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he was one of the agents or the foremans for the wrestlers. And he was always a really devoted family man and all that stuff, but he was always in the middle of the orgy with, and he would come in and shake his head, and he didn't know who was doing it for a long time. Because I would draw these drawings in the blackboard, because sometimes in the dressing room, there's like 5 or 6 different dressing rooms, and 2 or 3 guys in one dressing room, 1 guy's in another, and like 20 guys are in the other one. It just depends on where you walk in when you set your bag down. And so often I was just sitting in the dressing room and nobody was around. I just draw these huge, I had nothing else to do especially when you got done in your shower. It's like you got all night sitting there waiting for somebody to finish. So you just keep drawing this orgy. And I didn't realize it, but Andre the Giant loved my drawings. He didn't, I don't think Andre even knew it was me drawing them for a long time, but I would draw them and they were like this mysterious artist running around in the dressing room that's drawing all these things. And I remember some guys would flip out and get mad, and most of the guys would laugh their heads off, but nobody really knew. I don't know if you remember George Wells. He was a football player that was in WWE, that was a great guy. That he would come in and laugh so hard, but he would always try to touch up and change little things and write little bubbles in the cartoons and stuff. And I remember people will come in, and I remember that Chief Jay staring with his hands on his hips, watching him touch up one of my cartoons. And I remember he turned around and goes, I swear to God, it's not me drawing these. But they thought it was him for a long time, until I had to kind of come forward, because I thought I better get credit for these drawings. So they're getting too popular. But Andre would really love my drawings. He honestly, it's hard to describe how, sometimes it's like Bret just finished a drawing and Andre would kick his chair out and like almost run to the room to look, and then he would just laugh and laugh so hard. And it was actually very heartwarming for me to make Andre laugh that hard, because a lot of my cartoons were, overly graphic and stuff like that.
What was the King Kong Bundy one?
The King Kong Bundy one was one of my favorites. I drew King Kong Bundy. It was his last day. I remember Survivor Series. It might have been the very first Survivor Series we ever did, and I think Bundy was in it. And I just remember I drew Bundy on his hands and knees, throwing up, and he was throwing up a big, giant pile of penises. I mean, there was like a big pile of them, and he was just like, and they're all just coming out. And I remember everyone laughed. It got such a good laugh. It was like one of my favorite cartoons. And I just remember Bundy came in and he laughed, and by then he knew it was me doing the cartoons. And it always made me laugh because he wrote every one of my brother's names. I don't know how he knew all my brother's names, but he wrote all my brother's names on each penis. And but there was a lot of them. I always had Virgil hanging himself. And Virgil loved that. He'd like somehow be hanging from the tree from his own penis. And it was just stuff like that. But it was always, most guys loved it. Poor Steve Lombardi, I always drew him, doing some horrible things in these cartoons. And he it was always like, I remember one time he goes, I'm not gay. I'm not, I'm not, I'm not like that. And like you draw all that stuff on there. Like it was starting to really kind of get to him. And I remember I told him, I said, Steve, none of this is based on anything real. It's all I said, the next time I draw a cartoon of you and you're, doing something really bad in the cartoon, I don't want you to think about the cartoon. I said, just look over at Andre. And if you don't see Andre laughing his head off, then I'll stop drawing you. And I remember he came back and he told me, he said, you draw me anytime you want. Because Andre would literally like fall off his chair laughing so hard. And I did draw one time. I drew one of my foremans. I won't say which one. There was a story circulated back. Like I said, these stories are probably not even true, but some story circulated about him and a woman. And I drew some on the blackboard. I remember he was basically throwing her off a cliff. Anyway, I remember I had the cartoons that somewhere in the Rockies, and but I drew it in on the blackboard, and he just wigged out. He totally lost. He got so mad, and he's almost like shrieking at me, like, "Don't you ever draw me on the blackboard again? What if my wife saw that and all this?" And I was like, "What's your wife going to be doing walking in the dressing room? Like, it's never going to happen." Anyway, he really chewed my ear off, and I remember thinking, boy, I'm in a lot of trouble for this. And it was the very next day. I remember walking into the TV taping, and you got to be there at noon. So I was walking in about noon, 12 o'clock, and I just see Vince with his arms crossed. He's by the blackboard drawing. He's holding a big piece of chalk. And I remember walking in, and he hands me the chalk, and he's got this smirk on his face. He goes, "You draw anything you want, anytime you want. And if anyone's got a problem with it, you tell them to see me." And I was like, he told me, he says, it's good for morale. He goes, it cheers everybody up and makes everyone laugh their head off, and you don't have don't let anyone stop you from doing it. So I always drew cartoons. In fact, most of my career, people were always like wanting to get on the blackboard. I remember like when I remember Undertaker finally, he never made the blackboard, not yet anyway at that time when I first knew him. And I remember he bought a Harley Davidson, and he was talking about it for months that he had this new Harley Davidson that he bought that was brand new, and they were shipping it to his house. And I remember him talking about going home the day he was going to ride it. And it was brand new. First day he got it, he took it out and he crashed it. He hit gravel or something like that, and he luckily didn't get hurt or anything, but he totaled his bike or something like that. And I remember I drew it on the blackboard, and I had him riding a tricycle. And it was just a silly cartoon, but it was like the first time I ever drew Undertaker. And it was like a big thing. A lot of guys didn't like being drawn, and when you drew them, they weren't flattered by how you drew them, because if they were pot-bellied, they were even worse than that in the cartoon. And I remember Warrior one time. There was a story that came out. It was in one of those tabloid magazines about him doing massages or something with gay men, or I don't even know if it was true. But it was a big expose on Warrior. This is probably when he was in the height of his, like probably 87, 88, 89, somewhere in there. And I remember it was very embarrassed by it was like, it was in this tabloid magazine or newspaper kind of thing. And it was fun, one of those things where everyone was kind of tiptoeing around it. And I remember I drew the whole thing with Warrior on the bearskin rug with some guy rubbing. And I knew, I was like, okay, this is going to really, unfortunately, it's going to really make Warrior really mad. But the truth is that Warrior was so embarrassed by the story, true or false. I don't know if it was ever true, and who can believe those kind of news tabloid things. And I just remember Warrior came in the dressing room, and all the wrestlers were laughing their heads off. And then Warrior came in the room, and he saw it. And he laughed so hard that it broke the ice on the whole thing, and it was like never brought up again. And I thought, that's the way to do it. Is like throw it right in everyone's face and get it over with. So it's like everyone had a good laugh. I remember Warrior Bones the first time he made the blackboard and all that stuff.